A cold had teeth, that February, the kind of prairie cold that doesn't blow so much as press, leaning its whole weight against the windows until the glass moaned. Outside, the laundromat on Front Street, the streetlights buzzed orange over a town that had mostly gone to bed, and the snow that had fallen all afternoon now squeaked underfoot like styrofoam, the way it only does when the thermometer drops past -30. Wheatley Crossing wasn't much of a town to begin with. A grain elevator, a curling rink, a gas station that doubled as the post office, and on a night like this it felt smaller still, hunkered down, holding its breath until morning. Inside the Soap and Suds, the air was thick and warm, and smelled of dryer sheets and old coffee, and the only sounds were the tumble of a single machine, and the tick of the baseboard heaters working overtime. Wesley Doucette sat in one of the bolted-down plastic chairs along the wall, a chair the color of weak tea, and watched his wash go round and round behind the glass, like he was waiting on something more than clean clothes. He was 39, though the last couple of years had pressed a few extra ones onto his face. He had the kind of hands that told you what he did before he said a word, cracked knuckles, a permanent gray shadow of grease in the creases no amount of lava soap could scrub out. He fixed things over at Halverson's garage, mostly half-tons and grain trucks and the occasional snowmobile somebody had run into a fence. He was good at it. He'd always been good at fixing things, which was its own small cruelty, because the one thing he couldn't fix was the empty side of the bed at home, and the quiet that had moved in after Karen passed. That was the word everyone used. Passed, as if she'd just stepped out of the room, and might come back. The cancer had taken 11 months from diagnosis to the funeral, and it had taken the savings right along with her, the way these things do, so that grief and the overdue notices arrived in the same stack of mail. Now it was just him and Maddie, who was 6 and missing her front teeth and still asked, some nights, when Mommy was coming home, and Wes had run out of gentle ways to answer that didn't break something inside his chest. He was at the laundromat at 9:30 on a Tuesday because the washer at the house had quit in December, and there hadn't been money to fix it, and there still wasn't, and the basket of laundry had finally gotten high enough that he couldn't pretend it wasn't there. Maddie was home with Mrs. Friesen from next door, asleep by now he hoped, with the good electric blanket and the hallway light on the way she liked it. He'd told himself he'd be quick, but there was something about the warmth in here, and the hum, and the fact that nobody at the Soap and Suds needed anything from him, that made him slow to leave. He could just sit. He didn't have to be strong for anybody in a laundromat. That was almost a kind of rest. The bell over the door jingled, and a gust of that brutal air rolled in along the floor, and Wes looked up. A boy stood in the doorway, struggling to drag a black garbage bag nearly as big as he was over the threshold. He couldn't have been more than 8. He had on a parka that had been somebody else's first. You could tell by the way the cuffs were folded back twice, and a toque pulled down so far it nearly swallowed his eyebrows. His cheeks were blotched red with cold, and there was frost in his eyelashes. He got the bag inside, let the door bang shut behind him, and stood there a moment catching his breath, looking around the empty laundromat with the wary, sizing up look of a kid who has learned to read a room before he trusts it. He was alone. That was the first thing Wes noticed, and it sat wrong with him. A boy that age, out at this hour in this cold by himself. The boy hauled the bag over to the bank of machines on the far wall, putting distance between them, and began pulling clothes out and stuffing them into a washer. Little jeans, a couple of t-shirts, a girl's nightgown with cartoon horses on it, some socks. Methodical. He'd done this before. He dug in his pocket and came out with a fistful of change, and Wes watched him sort it slowly on top of the machine, counting under his breath, the way you count when the number matters. Wes knew that count. He'd done that count himself at the grocery till more times than he wanted to admit, putting the chicken back, keeping the eggs. The boy fed quarters into the machine, then stopped, frowned, counted what was left in his palm, and his shoulders dropped about an inch. He looked at the change, then at the dryers across the way, then at the change again, and Wes could see the math happening on his small face. Enough to wash, not enough to dry. For a minute, Wes told himself it wasn't his business. People had their pride out here. You didn't go butting in. But then the boy did something that undid him. He leaned his forehead against the cool front of the machine and just stood there, eyes shut, like he was too tired to figure it out and too young to be that tired. Wes got up. He moved slow, the way you move toward a barn cat you don't want to spook, and he crouched down a few feet off so he wasn't looming. Cold one out there, eh? He said. Easy. Like they were two guys at the elevator. The boy's eyes came open. He went still, watchful. You doing the wash all by yourself? Wes asked. That's a big job. The boy considered him for a long moment, deciding. Then quietly, "My mom's at work." "Yeah. Where's she at?" "Pinecrest. The care home out on the highway where half the town's grandparents went eventually. She does nights. I help with the laundry so she doesn't have to do it on her day off." He said it plainly, not for sympathy, just stating the arrangement of his life. "That's a good helper," Wes said. "What's your name?" "Gul." "Owen." "I'm Wes." He didn't offer his hand. 8-year-olds didn't shake hands, and anyway he didn't want to make it a thing. "I fix trucks over at Halverson's. You know the place? Big blue building by the tracks." Owen nodded. Some of the wariness had gone out of him. Wes looked at the change still sitting on the washer. "You short for the dryer?" he asked, gentle as he could make it. And here was the thing that he would carry with him for a long time after, the small moment that the whole night seemed to turn on. Owen's chin trembled just once, and he got it under control the way kids do, who've had a lot of practice. He leaned in, lowered his voice, even though there was nobody else to hear. Like he was confessing something shameful. "Our power got shut off," he whispered. "So Mom says the wet clothes'll just freeze at home. She says it's warmer here than our house right now. That's why I have to dry them here." He looked at the floor, "But I only had enough for the wash." Wes didn't answer right away. Not because he hadn't heard. Because he had. The words went all the way down into him and landed somewhere he kept locked, the place where the overdue notices lived, where the cancelled cable and the church food hampers and the shame of all of it lived. He thought of his own house, of the furnace he'd been nursing along, praying it would last till spring, because a new one was $4,000 he didn't have. He thought of how close, how thin the ice was for everybody out here, and how nobody talked about it, and how a kid was standing in front of him saying out loud the thing that grown men in this town would rather freeze than say. He thought of Maddie. He thought of how, if it had been her standing here, he would want God. He would want someone to be kind. "Tell you what," Wes said, and his voice came out a little rougher than he meant. He cleared his throat. "I got a whole pile of quarters here and not near enough laundry to use them up. You'd be doing me a favor." He pulled the roll of change from his coat pocket, the one he kept in the truck console for the car wash and the parking meters in the city, and he cracked it open against the edge of the machine and let a good handful spill into his palm. "Dryers are on me tonight, both of yours, full cycle." Owen's eyes went wide, and then immediately suspicious, because kids who've gone without learn fast that nothing's free. "I can't pay you back," he said. "Didn't ask you to. My mom says we don't take charity." "This isn't charity," Wes said, and he meant it, and he searched for how to make a boy believe it. "This is, look. You ever help somebody push their car out of a snowbank?" Owen nodded slowly. "You ask them for $10 after?" "No." "Why? Why not?" The boy thought about it. "'Cause they're stuck." "There you go." Wes set the quarters down next to Owen's little pile, gently, like he was returning something the boy had dropped. "Everybody gets stuck. That's all this is. You'd do the same for me." Something in the boy's face loosened. Not all the way, but enough. While the wash ran, Wes did the thing he was worst at, which was talk. He was a quiet man by nature, made quieter by the last 2 years, but he found himself sitting back down and asking Owen easy questions, and the boy, thawing, answered them. He was 8.5, the half mattered, he was in grade 3. His teacher's name was Miss Aktamichuk, and she was nice but had a loud voice. He had a sister, Ruby, who was 4.5. The half mattered for her too, and she was home with their neighbor Mrs. Quewazance because she was too little to come out in the cold. The nightgown with the horses was Ruby's. Ruby loved horses even though she'd only ever seen one in real life, at the fall fair, and she'd cried when they had to leave. Owen told him these things the way kids do, sideways, while picking at a loose thread on his cuff, not looking up. And Wes listened the way he hadn't listened to anybody in a long while. Because listening to Owen meant he didn't have to think about himself. "Where's your dad at?" Wes asked, and then wished he hadn't. Owen shrugged, that practiced shrug again. "Calgary, I think. He sends a card sometimes." A pause. "Not lately." Wes nodded and let it lie. He knew better than most that some absences you don't poke at. The wash buzzed. Together, they moved the wet clothes to 2 dryers. And Wes showed Owen how you tossed in a couple of those gray rubber balls from the bin by the folding table to keep the load from clumping. A trick Karen had taught him, though he didn't say that part. He fed in the quarters. The drums began to turn, and the clothes rose and fell, and warm air poured out the front, and Owen stood close to it with his hands held up to the heat like it was a campfire. After a while he peeled off the borrowed parka and the tokik, and underneath he was just a skinny kid with a cowlick and a Rough Riders t-shirt 2 sizes too big, and he looked, For the first time, not like a small adult managing a crisis but like a child who was allowed to be warm. It was a little before 10 when the bell jingled again and a woman came in fast, breathless, already talking. Owen baby, I'm so sorry, my shift." She stopped short when she saw Wes. She was maybe 35, in green scrubs under an open winter coat, her dark hair pulled back, her face the particular gray of somebody who has been tired so long that tired has become the baseline. Her name was Diane. Wes would learn it in a minute, and she had her car keys still in her hand and the engine probably still running out front. And her eyes went straight from Wes to her son and back again, and Wes watched a whole storm cross her face. Fear first. Then the hot flush of shame. Then a kind of bracing, like she was getting ready to apologize for something, or defend something. He couldn't tell which. "It's okay, Mom," Owen said quickly. "This is Wes. He fixes trucks. He helped me dry the clothes." Diane's hand came up to her mouth. She held it there a second, pressing, and Wes recognized that too. The gesture of somebody trying to hold a thing in. He'd done it at the funeral home, picking out the casket, when the man had named the prices. "I got off late," she said to Wes, the words tumbling. "There was an incident on the ward, a resident fell, I couldn't. I told him to stay home but the clothes had to get done, the kids need." She stopped, started again, lower. "I shouldn't have let him come out alone, I know that. It's only 4 blocks and he's careful, but I know. It's just been." Her voice gave out. "Hey," Wes said, standing, keeping his voice level and low, the voice he used for skittish dogs and stalled engines and his daughter at 3 in the morning. "Nobody's keeping score here, he's a good kid, he did everything right." Diane looked at the dryers, at the quarters, at the clothes going round, and she understood, and Wes saw her understand, and he saw it cost her something. "You paid for the dryers," she said. "It wasn't quite a question." "Yeah, I had extra," Wes said. "Honest, it's nothing." "It's not nothing." Her eyes were wet now, and she was furious at herself for it, blinking hard. She shook her head. "People don't anymore, around here. Everybody's got their own troubles. Nobody's got anything left over." "I know it," Wes said quietly. "Believe me, I know it." And something in how he said it must have reached her, because she looked at him then, really looked. The way one person looks at another when they recognize the same wound. And the bracing went out of her shoulders. She sat down in one of the tea-colored chairs, hard, like her legs had just decided for her, and she put her face in her hands for a moment, and Owen went and leaned against her side without being told, and she put an arm around him on reflex. "It's the furnace," she said, muffled into her hands, "or the power, or, I don't even know anymore. It all comes due at once. They cut the power Thursday. I've got the disconnection notice from the gas company on the fridge. I'm working as many shifts as they'll give me." She lifted her head. Her eyes were red but steady now. "I'm not telling you this I don't want anything. I haven't said it out loud to anybody. You say it out loud in a town like this, and by Sunday everybody knows, and then you're the family at the food bank, and the kids hear about it at school." She let out a breath that shook. "I keep thinking I'm one good week away from getting ahead. And then the truck needs a battery, or Ruby needs boots." "What's wrong with the battery?" Wes said. She blinked. "What?" "You said the truck. What's it doing?" "It's slow to turn over, in the cold. Sometimes it doesn't." She gave a tired half-law. "It's parked out front right now and I'm scared to shut it off in case it won't start." "That's likely just the battery," Wes said. "Or the block heater's not plugged in or it's gone. Cheap fix. I could look at it." He shrugged, made it small. "I'm standing here doing nothing anyway." She stared at him like she was trying to find the catch. People had taught her there was always a catch. Wes knew that lesson too. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I want to," he said, and that was the truth of it. He wanted, just once, to fix a thing that would actually stay fixed. To put his hands on a problem that had an answer. He pulled his own toque on, and went out into the cold, and the engine was indeed running, rough and rattly, and he popped the hood, and shone his phone light, around, and within 2 minutes found that the block heater cord was frayed clean through where it had been run over, one too many times backing out of a driveway, and the battery terminals were so corroded they were furred green. Nothing fatal. Nothing that money even really had to be the answer to. He scraped the terminals clean, with the multi-tool he kept on his belt, and tightened the connections, and came back in rubbing his hands. "Terminals were shot," he told her. "Cleaned 'em up. She'll start better now. Cord on your block heater's done, but I got a spare at the shop. I'll bring it by. Drops it'll start every time, even at -40. He paused. "You shouldn't be paying somebody $200 for that. I'll do it. Takes 10 minutes. Diane's mouth opened and closed. "Why?" she said finally. Not ungrateful, genuinely needing to know, "Why are you being like this?" Wes was quiet for a moment. The dryers tumbled. Behind the counter, the old clock with the faded ad for a feed company that had gone under years ago ticked on. "My wife died a year and a half ago," he said. He didn't usually say it this plain, but she'd been plain with him, and she'd earned plain back. "Karen, we've got a little girl, Maddie. She's 6. He looked at the floor, then made himself look back up. "When Karen was sick, I found out something I didn't know before. I found out how fast it can all go sideways. One bad break, and suddenly you're the one at the food bank, the one whose kids got the wrong boots." He swallowed. "And I found out the other thing too, that when you're going under, it's not the big stuff that keeps your head up. It's some lady you barely know dropping off a casserole. It's the guy at the parts counter who lets you owe him till Friday. It's somebody just seeing you, not pretending they don't notice you're drowning." He nodded toward Owen, who drifted back to the warm dryers. "Somebody saw me when I was right where you are," Wes said. "So, that's why." Diane didn't say anything for a while. She didn't need to. She just nodded, slow, and wiped her eyes with the heel of her hand, and the two of them sat in the warm quiet while the clothes dried. Two parents on a Tuesday night, both of them stretched to the last thread, neither of them, for the length of that hour, alone in it. When the dryers finished, Owen folded the clothes the careful way his mom had clearly taught him, smoothing each little shirt, matching the socks. Wes helped, and they got it all into the garbage bag, and Diane took out a worn vinyl change purse to pay him back for the dryers, and Wes wouldn't hear of it, and they did the small dance of that, and in the end she put the change purse away because he'd left her no room not to. While she gathered Ruby's nightgown off the folding table, Wes did a quiet thing. He'd been turning it over the whole last half hour. He didn't have much. God knew he didn't have much. The furnace at home was held together with prayer and the property tax was due in March. But he had a little put by in the coffee can over the fridge, the not much that he'd been adding to a few dollars at a time. The thin cushion between his family and the same cold edge Diane was teetering on. He didn't have to think hard about it, which surprised him. He took out his wallet and slid out the bills, more than he should, every 20 he had, and he folded them small. He'd been a fixer his whole life. He knew you couldn't fix this with one night's worth of bills. But he also knew that sometimes a thing that won't fix the whole problem still buys somebody a week to breathe, and a week to breathe is sometimes the difference. He found a receipt in his pocket and turned it over and borrowed a pen from the cup by the cash register. And he wrote on the back of it, his blocky mechanic's printing, the only words he could think of that were true. "Nobody should have to choose between the heat and the wash. This isn't charity, it's just one stuck person helping another. Get the power back on, then someday do it for the next one. Wes." He tucked the folded bills inside the note and the note into the side pocket of the garbage bag, down deep where she wouldn't find it till later, because he knew. He knew the same way he'd known about the count, the same way he'd known the look she gave when she walked in, that if he handed it to her now she wouldn't take it. Pride was the last thing the poor get to keep, and he wasn't going to make her give it up in front of her son under fluorescent lights. He carried the bag out to the truck for her. He plugged in the block heater cord himself, what was left of it, and told her again he'd bring the new one Thursday, and he wrote his number on her hand with the borrowed pen, because she had no paper, and made her promise to call. If the truck didn't start, any hour, he meant it. He crouched down to Owen's level and held out his fist, and Owen, after a second, bumped it. "You did real good tonight," Wes told him. "Looking out for your family like that. Not everybody your age would. Your mom's lucky." Owen's chest went up a little, the way a kid's does when a grown man means it. "Thanks for the quarters," he said. "Anytime, you know where I am, big blue building by the tracks." He stood and watched the truck pull out. And it started clean, first turn, and he heard the difference, and so did Diane, who looked back at him through the frosted glass with something he couldn't name and didn't need to. And the taillights went red down Front Street and turned at the elevator and were gone. Wes stood alone in the parking lot a minute, in the awful beautiful cold, the kind of night where the sky over the prairie goes hard and clear and the stars come out so thick and close it doesn't seem possible. His breath hung in front of him. His own laundry was still in the dryer back inside. He'd forgotten all about it, and for the first time in a long time, the weight he carried everywhere, the weight that lived behind his sternum and woke up before he did every morning, felt, not gone, but lighter, shared out somehow. Sat down for a minute. He thought about Karen. He thought she would have liked Owen. He thought she'd have had Diane and the kids over for supper inside of a week, the power back on or not, and would have found 3 boxes of stuff in the basement that Maddie had outgrown and, didn't Ruby need a winter coat? What a coincidence. That was Karen. He'd lost the habit of her kindness when he lost her. Maybe, he thought, Standing there freezing and not caring. Maybe you could get the habit back. Maybe that was a thing a person could choose. Later, in the truck somewhere south of town, when Diane reached into the side pocket of the garbage bag, at a red light looking for Ruby's misplaced mitten, she would find the folded note instead, and the bills inside it, and she would have to pull over onto the shoulder with her hazards on because she couldn't see the road through what came up in her. She would read the note 3 times. She would hold it against the wheel and let it all out, the months of it, the held breath of it, with her sleeping son's head against the window beside her, and when she was done she would feel the strange unfamiliar thing that had been in such short supply that she'd half forgotten its shape. The feeling that she might, after all, make it. That she was not, in fact, alone out here at the bottom of the world. And in the back of the truck, half asleep, Owen would stir and murmur, "Mom, why're we stopped?" And Diane would wipe her face fast and say, "Nothing, baby, just looking at the stars. Go back to sleep." And he would, easy the way you sleep when you're 8 and warm and your clothes are clean, and a man who fixes trucks has decided, for no reason you'll understand for years, to be kind to you. That winter, the power came back on at Diane's the very next day. The note had more in it than Wes let himself remember putting there. The block heater cord got installed on Thursday, just like he said, and stayed installed, and the truck started every cold morning after. Diane brought a pan of cabbage rolls to the garage to say thank you, and stayed for coffee in the cold little waiting room, and came back the week after that, and somewhere in there the coffees stopped being thank yous and started being just coffee. Maddie met Ruby. The two of them became the kind of friends that Smalls girls become, fierce and instant, and over horses. And the houses on the edge of Wheatley Crossing, the thin-walled ones where everybody pretended to count at the till, was about something other than what it was about. Stayed cold and stayed hard. That's the truth, the prairie doesn't soften for anybody. But two of them, that winter, were a little warmer than they'd been. Because 2 stuck people had reached across the gap between them in a laundromat at 10 o'clock at night, and decided not to look away. It doesn't take a fortune. That was the thing Wes understood now, the thing he wished somebody could broadcast over the whole tired country every February when the bills and the cold come due together. It doesn't take a fortune, and it doesn't take a hero, and it doesn't take the right words. It takes a roll of quarters and a willingness to notice. It takes saying everybody gets stuck and meaning it. The smallest warmth, handed over at the right moment on the coldest night, to the right cold pair of hands. Sometimes that's the whole of it. Sometimes that's enough to change the temperature of a life. I think about that laundromat more than I expected to. About a boy named Owen dragging a garbage bag of wash through a door at -30, counting quarters on top of a machine, doing a grown man's arithmetic with a kid's cold hands. And I keep landing on the same quiet truth. Nothing about that night happened by accident. Wes didn't help because he was a saint. He helped because he had been there himself. Because grief had already taught him exactly how thin the ice is for everybody. And because he made a choice in the half-second after Owen whispered. That's the part I hold on to. The choice came first. Everything good that followed. The power coming back on, the cabbage rolls, 2 little girls becoming friends over horses. All of it traced straight back to one man deciding not to look away. If I've learned anything from watching how that night unspooled, it's that the people who change things aren't the ones with the deepest pockets. Wes had a coffee can over the fridge and a furnace held together with hope, and he still found a way. What he had instead of money was the decency to notice a stranger drowning and refuse to pretend he hadn't. He had the good sense to fix the real problem. Corroded terminals, a frayed cord, pride that couldn't accept a handout in the open. Instead of the easy one, he read Diane right. He hid the note where she'd find it alone, in the dark, where she could fall apart without an audience. That isn't softness. That's a kind of clear-eyed judgment most of us never bother to develop, the wisdom to know what someone actually needs versus what's easiest to give. And it took a spine. Walking out into that cold to crawl under a stranger's truck after a long shift, opening his own thin savings when he had a daughter and a dying furnace of his own. That took the kind of steadiness that doesn't announce itself. Wes had been knocked flat by losing Karen, and he got back up anyway, and then he reached down to pull somebody else up too. That's the thing I'd want a kid of mine to take from this. Not that the world is kind, it often isn't, but that you can be, even when you're stretched to your own last thread. And that being kind on a hard night is a muscle, not a mood. Joe, when somebody in front of me is doing that quiet count at the till, or standing too long at a cold window, I try to remember Owen, and his sister's little nightgown with the horses, and a roll of quarters cracked open against a machine. I try to be the one who notices. Everybody gets stuck. That was Wes's whole sermon, and he was right. The least we can do, when we've got even a little left over, is reach across the gap.